right, you guys. Welcome, welcome. A few housekeeping things here. Get this ready to go tonight. Hope everybody's having a great evening. Looks like we've got a couple more people here kind of joining us. So as they do, just right off the bat, guys, just want to welcome everybody. My name is Adam Lang. Welcome to tonight's Denver Home Buying Masterclass going into 2026. Before we get started, I just wanted to be real with you guys for a second. This is definitely, without a doubt, one of the most unique and challenging housing markets we've seen in a very long time here in Denver. Prices are high, interest rates are still being pretty stubborn, and competition at times can definitely feel pretty overwhelming. I know I had a few clients last week that was really hitting close to home for them. So if you guys are kind of in that same boat, if you're feeling frustrated or maybe even discouraged, you're not alone. But here is the good news. Even in this market, there are still really smart ways to win as we go into 2026. And tonight we're going to be sharing with you guys, showing you exactly how buyers, maybe just like you are, successfully landing homes here in Denver. So you guys are going to leave tonight with clear strategies, proven tips, and just a game plan for what you can use, whether you're looking to buy later this year or maybe not for another, 6 or 12 months. So I'm really excited to see a lot of you guys joining in. I see a few names that I recognize from other states from kind of around the country. So that's awesome. And along with my co-host, Benjamin Adams, who I'll introduce to you guys here in a second, we're going to dive into a lot of really valuable stuff. So tonight we're going to be covering, just to kind of run through it really quick for you guys. First off, just a complete overview of the home buying process using an approach that Ben and I both created known as the close method. We're also going to break down today's market conditions, both nationally as well as locally here in Denver, especially as we wrap up these last couple months in 2025. I'm going to be sharing just some of the real top strategies for what we're doing with our clients to win today. And also going to be sharing with you guys 3 of the most common buyer mistakes that you definitely want to avoid at all costs. And then finally, at the end, we're going to be sharing some next steps, a bunch of other free resources for you guys to take advantage of, and a live Q&A to answer any questions that might come up as we go through all of this tonight pretty quickly. So some housekeeping as we get started here. Please keep your microphone, if you can, on mute. We're definitely going to be going really fast. So at times it might feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose. So if questions do come up, you can always type them in the chat on the sidebar on your right-hand side of your screen. You'll see a button that says private chat. Feel free to type in any questions in real time there. And Ben and I will both be, managing that. If it's a time where maybe we can even answer the question right then and there, we will. Otherwise, we'll save it for that Q&A at the end. So again, really excited to have you guys all on with us tonight. Let's jump into it. And with that, let me welcome Ben. Ben, what's up, bud?
Hey, thank you so much for having me again. I love doing these because I want to help people make informed decisions. There's so much misinformation out there. I'm seeing a lot of hesitancy. Buyers sometimes can be tentative because they don't know if right now is the right time to buy. So I think we're going to answer some of those questions and looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Definitely. So you guys, these may or may not be some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now, but I wanted to start off this slide before, kind of introducing a little bit more about why Ben's on tonight and what is just going to be so great to have him, as always, with me on this. But some of the biggest challenges that I'm finding with my clients right now that they're faced with, the biggest ones, these are kind of like the 4. So number 1, saving for a down payment, just understanding that buyers don't necessarily need to put down 20%. So we're going to talk through a little bit of that. Also, just understanding the market, it's changing all the time, especially in these last couple of years. And it's also significantly different both locally versus nationally. So we're going to talk through a little bit more on both of those markets. Also, one thing that I'm really passionate about, which is writing competitive offers, just really understanding how to craft a strong offer that's going to stand out, especially if we get into next year where we might start seeing more competition again, where you might be competing against multiple offers to try and buy the home of your dreams. And then last but not least, finding the right home. So I'm going to share with you guys a few tips that I use with my clients, how to balance your needs, your budget, your location, and just make sure that you're only really focused on properties that make the most sense and are, likely to hopefully be the right one for you. So before we jump into all of that, just want to introduce and just kind of brag a little bit about my co-host, Ben, here. So Ben, Colorado native, University of Colorado graduate, along with myself. So go Buffs. Over 22 years of industry experience. Ben, you've personally funded, at this point, it's probably a little bit above this. We made this slide a few months back, but over 300 million in home loans. You've helped more than 700 families achieve home ownership, 4-time Scotsman Guide Award winner for production excellence. And I think another really important one that everybody I know can get a lot of value from is really looking up to your skill set when it comes to actively being a real estate investor with a personal portfolio of over 20 plus units across 3 states. I know you have a lot more than just what I put on this right now, but just really excited to have you on, and your wealth of knowledge really just motivated me over the last few years, as well as a lot of our other attendees of the past webinars we've done. So thanks again for being on all of those, and especially on this one tonight.
Well, I am so excited to be here, and I look at this as an opportunity and as a privilege. And, once again, just so excited to start the conversation. And I just want to be a resource. I want to help folks make the right decisions and add value. And ultimately, what you'll hear me reference a lot is I want buyers to make informed financial decisions based off of what is in their best interest. And with webinars and resources like this, we help them identify what those are.
Love it.
Now, do you mind if I introduce you?
Make it quick.
So, all right, well, why listen to Adam? Adam is a 42-year-old Colorado and Denver native, had an incredible year last year, ranked 5th out of 344 Denver agents in 2024 sales volume with EXP. Last week, he had a $1.4 million sale that closed on Thursday. And then he had a $900,000 listing that sold on Friday. So he's having an incredible 2025 as well. Also in the top 10% of all Colorado agents with over 8 million in sales last year. Certified real estate negotiation expert, host of Living in Denver, YouTube. I call him the YouTube agent because if you go to YouTube, you type in Living in Denver, he has, I think, over 100 videos, right, of just all over Denver.
Yep, I think about 130 at this point.
130, yeah, just amazing resource. So if you're looking to buy here in Denver, I mean, he has covered every single neighborhood. Also the co-host with me on the Pursuit of Progress podcast, and over 55 5-star Google reviews. So congratulations. What a resume, Adam.
Thanks, buddy. All right, enough about that. Let's just kind of jump into it. So I always like to start off with just talking again about the local and national market. So if you guys saw earlier today, the interest rates as of this morning, we're right at about 6.13%. And, I have a series of slides that I kind of repurpose for every one of our webinars. We do these monthly. So if you guys ever want to join another one, you're always more than welcome. But on the last month's webinar, when I was updating a few slides, including this one, the same exact number, 6.13, had actually been a rate that we had hit back in the beginning of October. And at that point, it was the lowest in 3 years. So I wasn't sure if we'd had a day since then that maybe was slightly below 6.13. That's why I put this is close to being the lowest rate. But just making the point, I just want to kind of identify that and just mention that, again, today we're at that point, which is pretty much the lowest rate we've seen in 3 years. So, a little bit of optimism, just hopefully a sign of what's to come here in the future. Before I kind of move into a few slides that I prepared on the market, Ben, is there anything you'd maybe like just to say about that specifically, just with the rate being, finally back into the low 6s? And then also I saw that there was some news from the Fed today also.
Yeah, the Fed did cut the Fed funds rate 1/4 point. So that's always exciting. Now that's already been priced into the market. What's most important is we're going to see how the market reacts to that over the next couple of days. Big picture, 5280 aerial view, interest rates the lowest they've been in the last 52 weeks. So I think that's exciting. Right now, what I'm seeing are some of the things that you just referenced, affordability challenges. There's down payment affordability challenges, and then also monthly payment affordability challenges. So when interest rates come down, that helps with the monthly payment. So excited with where we're at, and we will see what's in store over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to leave in this slide, which I also had from last month, just because it was just kind of fun and interesting to share with you guys. So just about a week and a half ago, we had what was Realtor.com was calling the best week of 2025 to buy a house. And I'll preface that, though, with just saying that the best time to buy a house is always when it makes the most sense for you. And I wanted to include that just little caveat here as we start talking through some more of these, just different statistics and some of these just strategies tonight. Just to make that really clear to everybody that, even with rates going down, it still might not be the right time for you to buy. And maybe it's a great time for you to buy right now. But what's most important is always just having as much educational resources at your fingertips, doing things like you're doing tonight. So props to everybody that's on. We got a pretty full house, it looks like, tonight. So just taking action, taking steps to just be in a place, in a position when that day does come, that you're making an informed decision and you're going to be doing whatever makes the most sense for you. But the reason this was considered kind of the best week of the year was a few bullet points that I included here. A lot of homes are still on the market. Prices are a little bit lower now than they were in the peak selling season in the spring and summer. Any of the sellers that are out there that are really motivated to sell, maybe they've already moved on and bought a new home and their home that they're trying to sell is currently vacant. Those are great, potential homes that will be giving even larger incentives just to try and sell before the end of the year. So there's just a lot of stuff like that going on, which is all favoring you guys as a potential buyer. So a lot of good things right now when it comes to being a buyer. The biggest challenge is kind of what Ben was just saying, is just this affordability issue that we have here in Denver. So just to kind of share.
And what I was going to comment on that is that's why I get so excited being a real estate investor, being in the lending world, is that this is the first buyer's market that we've had in Denver and also nationally, really in the last 15 years. And so if you are a buyer, there's more inventory, you have more options, there's less buyers out there looking at homes. And so what that means is that you have more leverage. And so buyers right now, they have the upper hand. They're able to negotiate things like closing costs, getting the closing costs paid for by the seller, price reductions. And then there are specific ways that you can tackle affordability, different ways to buy the interest rate down and have the seller pay for it. There's 2-1 buy downs, 3-2-1 buy downs. There's permanent buy downs. So there's all these different ways that you can really, if affordability is a concern. And that's why I'm so big on putting a financial plan together and not having this be emotional. You want to make sure that you're, it's fun to have those emotions, but you also want to make sure that you're making responsible decisions. You want to know what your goals are, what your monthly budget is. And if you talk to your lending professional, your real estate professional, you say, this is the payment range that I'm looking to stay within. Is it possible? And there may be a path forward there, but if you don't share what that plan or that vision is, then your lending and your real estate professional, they're not going to be able to help you. So have that vision, have that financial plan, and share that with the appropriate parties.
Love that. So a few highlights from this past week. Every week I have a few different resources that I always pull a lot of my info from that I share with clients. And one of those is from a very experienced, is somebody that I trust and really look up to a lot. Her name is Megan Aller. And I pulled the most recent data that she had shared, which was a couple days ago. So I know this shows October 15th to 21st. I don't have the most recent week. That'll be coming out hopefully tomorrow. So the most recent week was a little bit over a week ago, but just a few bullet points I've got over these next two slides I want to share with you guys. So, the government shutdown, I think we just hit, I think it's like day 26, maybe. I mean, we're well over 3 weeks, going into 4 weeks at this point. It does continue to cause a few minor delays with FHA and also VA closings. Timelines just stretching a little bit longer than typical with those conventional loans. Not a deal breaker, but something just to keep in mind. Inventory does remain steady. Active listings holding consistent since mid-August. Compared to last year, inventory is still trending a little bit upward, and the year-over-year gap is narrowing quickly as we approach Thanksgiving and Christmas, only less than a month away at this point. And the odds of selling are also holding near levels that we saw around the 4th of July weekend. Listings are going under contract in the next 30 days. They're mostly flat week over week and slightly down year over year. And this is approaching one of the slowest points of the year, which I always like to just share with my the people that I talk to most regularly, kind of being from Thanksgiving through Super Bowl Sunday. So, all of December and January and maybe that first week of February. Yeah. A couple more highlights before getting Ben's take on some of this stuff. Showing activity declined again last week. So buyers are still out there, but they're just not really making serious moves or being cautious and taking their time. So if you guys are a seller also that might be on tonight, if your listing has gone a bit stale, if you're just not getting that level of interest you've been expecting to get, this upcoming weekend is probably going to be one of your last chances to really hit it hard before, Halloween's obviously on Friday. So we do have a lot of other things going on now with holidays and just going into that winter months. We're definitely, it tends to slow down quite a bit. So just being aware of that and having the correct expectations. And then price reductions are dipping a little bit again from last week. Serious sellers, though, are still making these meaningful cuts, not $5,000 here, $5,000 there. You're seeing, price cuts that are a little bit more significant. In some cases, probably kind of that last Hail Mary just to hopefully find a buyer before it really slows down. We also had a lot of homes that passed a week that went under contract, and they had at least, the key word there is at least one price drop. And while the average discount was slightly smaller than the prior week, it's still significantly higher than this time last year. Long-winded way of just saying that the sellers that are out there are making larger price cuts, or at least are more motivated to sell than we've seen in recent years. So more just good news for buyers out there. Ben, anything you want to share before I kind of do my one last slide on market data?
Yeah, I was just going to share, it's so important to know this information because you want to know where we're at in the market and what type of market that we're in. And the fact that it is a buyer's market, you really want to take advantage of that. And to kind of further that point, you also want to make sure that you're working with a real estate professional that is not afraid to really negotiate and represent you to the fullest. And what I mean by that is allowing you to take advantage of some of these opportunities, not being afraid to call the listing agent and do some negotiating or ask for seller paid closing costs, because not every buyer's agent is going to have the confidence to do that, because the market has been very different. So as we've kind of shifted over the last 6 months, you want to make sure that you're working with a real professional because it's so important.
Yep, definitely. So I'm not going to go through all of these one by one. I hit on some of these already in the last 2 slides, but just a couple takeaways that I think are important mentioning again, or at least highlighting. The first one, just talking again about how buyers are really being selective right now. Homes that check all the boxes in the past, those would get eaten up almost immediately. But now buyers, since they do have a little bit more leverage and can be a little bit more patient and picky, I think a lot of the homes are really starting to be priced a little bit more realistically. And those are the ones that are moving. Prices have, again, softened a little bit more over this past month. I think the last really big one I want to put on just to point out here is about how over half of the homes sold last month closed below asking price. And that's, again, it's another way that's really showing us this increased level of seller flexibility, including a lot of seller concessions, like Ben had teased at the very beginning of tonight's masterclass about these temporary and permanent rate buy downs. And we can talk through a little bit more about that if you guys aren't familiar with what those are. Ben will share more on that here in a little bit, but just making the point that there are a lot of seller concessions, and sellers are really doing whatever they can just to get their home sold. So great news if you guys are buyers here in the next 3 to 6 months, hopefully longer than that. I think it's going to continue into the beginning of next year. All right, so now we're going to dig into all the good stuff. Hopefully why live you guys are on tonight, just sharing some of these tips, how to succeed, how to be prepared to win in 2026. We're going to talk through all of that here in a second, but just wanted to also share with you guys at the end of tonight, I'll be sending out an email afterwards with a bunch of links, free resources. And one of those is over 2 hours of content that I've put together, which are just different videos that talk through everything that we're going to be going over tonight. So if there's certain things, certain aspects of this buyer process, maybe, for example, the part that involves writing an offer, I've got videos on that, and I'm going to be sharing these with you guys afterwards, where if you just need a little bit more clarity, those are at your fingertips. They're free. They're all just there to help you guys be more educated. So keep an eye out for that at the end of tonight. And with that, Ben, why don't you just maybe share with the audience tonight, just on kind of a quick high level, what is, kind of the typical buyer's roadmap? What are the kind of the big steps that most people will go through to buy a home?
Yeah, this is the buyer's roadmap, and these are really important milestones that you want to be aware of and make sure that you're doing things in the correct order. So milestone number 1 right there, meet with your real estate professional. You want to be able to touch base with a real estate professional that you trust. And again, someone that is a real estate professional when it comes to lending and mortgage, real estate agents. We probably all have a family member, a cousin, someone that we know. But ask yourself this, are they a professional? Is this their full-time job? Are they going to be willing to have some of those tough conversations and actually do some negotiating. So that's step number one. Step number two, get pre-approved. You want to know what your options are. You want to know what your purchasing power is. You want to know, are you eligible for any down payment assistance, special financing, first-time homebuyer programs? There are income restricted loan programs out there as well. You want to know what you are qualified for so you can plan better. And you also want to get pre-approved just so there's no surprises. The worst feeling in the world is to go under contract and then all of a sudden find out that there's problems with the financing because you didn't get pre-approved at the beginning like you should have. So I always really, really recommend that. Step number three there, that's when you start your home search. You've already met with your agent. You've been pre-approved. Now you're going to go search for homes. Step number four, you will write an offer, and you're going to do that with your buyer's agent. Step number five there is negotiating the contract. That's something that you're going to be doing, again, with your buyer's agent. Once you go under contract, that leads us to step number six, which is you're going to go into escrow. During this time, you're going to be ordering your inspection on the real estate side. Your lender will be ordering the appraisal. You're going to deposit your earnest money with the title vendor. Step number seven there. This is going to be the final details. So typically a couple of days before closing, you will receive the final settlement statement from the title company. Your lender will also send you your final closing disclosure. That's going to have a breakdown of all of the final numbers as well. They're required to get that to you at least 3 days prior to closing. And then after that, that takes you to step number 8, which is your closing day. That's going to be the day that you sign all of your lending documents, your real estate documents in front of a notary, and then you are going to get the keys. But really steps 1 and 2 there, very, very critical.
Yeah, thanks. That's very helpful. So we wanted to just put together a little bit more simplified version of that, which we thought were kind of the 5 most important steps. And we've, we realized, both Ben and myself, that what really helps to memorize and remember things are having an acronym. So we just created this one, which is our CLOSE method. So we'll go through each of these 5 steps together with you guys, CLOSE. And I'm just going to kind of go through the first one with you guys now. But really quick, I guess, before kind of sharing that. So the number 1, C, connecting with a lender, getting that pre-approval. With that, I just want to again share the data from today, where it was at 6.13%, and just want to have Ben talk a little bit more about how to financially prepare to buy a home. We've got some really good steps, specifically in a couple slides after this, with things like your credit utilization score and just some specifics. But Ben, maybe just kind of take this slide and the next one and just present to everybody why this is the first step and why it's so important to be doing this well in advance of going out and starting to look at homes.
Yeah, it's so important for some of the reasons that I touched on a minute ago. You just want to be financially prepared. You want to make sure that there's no surprises, that you're not caught off guard. You want to make sure that your credit score is in a place that it needs to be to allow you to, number 1, to get qualified and get pre-approved, but then also allow for the very best financing terms available. I always encourage all of my applicants and prospective home buyers, just fill out the application. It doesn't cost anything to fill out an application. There's no risk involved. A lot of lenders like us, I'm at North Point Bank, we have the ability to do a soft pull. And so what a soft credit pull is it gives us about 90% of the information on the credit report. We can access the scores, the obligations, the payment history, really everything that we need to make a decision without counting as a formal inquiry. So that's a really, really valuable tool. But most importantly, you want to know what your options are. You want to know if you are eligible for any preferred financing, first-time homebuyer financing. You want to know what your purchasing power is, just so you can make an informed decision. I'm very big on being a financial resource and helping my customers make informed financial decisions. As you're going through this process, and there is a big difference between getting pre-approved and pre-qualified. Someone that's getting pre-qualified, what they're doing is they're only filling out the application and then having the lender pull their credit. That's what a pre-qualification is. What I do, and this is coming from me as an underwriter, I was a mortgage underwriter for 10 years, and this has allowed me to never have missed a closing. I've never, not a single time, has a customer gone under contract and have there been lender problems where they can't close? It's not happened a single time. It's because of the underwriting mentality and the fact that we go through this pre-approval process. So we always verify income up front. If someone is an hourly rate employee or on salary, we're going to get their pay stubs, their W-2s for the past years. We're also going to verify their employment. We want to get the accurate 2-year employment history. So if there were any job changes, we're going to get a breakdown and a verification of employment on previous employers. We're going to have that credit pulled, as I mentioned. We also want to know where the down payment is coming from. I also do a lot of down payment assistance. Even with that, though, we need to make sure that we know where the earnest money is coming from, because that earnest money is going to be due within 48 hours of going under contract. The credit report is going to allow us to verify everything and all of the obligations that are on credit. But in some cases, there are going to be things that need to be considered that are not on credit. Child support, for example. I had a customer a couple of days ago that had a bunch of buy now, pay later accounts. And interestingly, those do not show up on credit. The underwriter saw those going through the bank statements. Again, where is the down payment coming from? It can come from a qualified checking, savings, investment, retirement account. We want to know that the customer has the ability for the down payment. And then the property information. That would entail, what are the property taxes? Is there an HOA? What I will do as a courtesy for all the customers that I work with, once they are pre-approved, I will have them send me the property address before they write an offer. And then that way I work up a customized quote before they actually write their offer with the interest rate. I verify the property taxes. We get a quote on the insurance. We verify if there is an HOA payment. And that way, before they even write an offer, they know with a high degree of accuracy what the financing terms are and what the monthly payment's going to be. Again, there's no feeling worse in the world than going under contract and then finding out a week later that your mortgage payment is going to be $1,000 higher than you were anticipating. So that is the value and that I offer, and some of the services that I offer. And I want to make sure that the buyers that I'm working with can shop with confidence and make informed decisions.
Love that. Yeah, that's a big difference from some of the others out there. So just for anybody that's maybe getting ready to be starting this part of the process, just whether it be Ben or somebody else, just make sure that you're using somebody that's really going above and beyond and making sure that you have exactly what you need, just to, go out and look for homes and make sure you're able to afford whatever budget is that you have for that.
Yeah. And one final thought on that, Adam, if you're someone that is working with or you're looking for down payment assistance, for example, ask those questions to your lender. Do you work with down payment assistance? Are you experienced with down payment assistance? If you're looking to purchase an investment property, ask your lender those questions. Are you personally a real estate investor? Do you have any experience with that? The reason I'm bringing this up is because you want to be working with someone that is extremely literate on what you're looking to accomplish. If you're a veteran and you're looking for a VA loan, you want to work with someone who has a high degree of literacy with VA loans. So you as a buyer, you can ask those questions. There's all types of different lenders out there: online lenders, credit unions, correspondent lenders, mortgage brokers, FDIC insured banks like us over at North Point. And that's what's great about North Point, is that we offer all of those different products. We're licensed in all 50 states. We do home equity loans. So if you need something, if you have a need, more than likely we can fill it. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that the representative that you're working with is affluent in exactly what you need.
Mm-hmm. So one last kind of point on this, the first of the 5 things, this is again the C, getting pre-approved. There's just as many important things to avoid doing after applying for a mortgage. And these are, incredibly important, and things that some of these I didn't even, to be honest with you guys, realize myself until kind of digging into this a little bit further, several years back. So Ben, help us just kind of talk through, maybe do a quick of all 5 of these, but especially, a couple that are really, really commonly, issues with a lot of people you've worked with that could potentially, make the deal go south.
Well, we talked about some of the do's. Now let's talk about some of the don'ts here. So number 1, don't change bank accounts. Sometimes I'll see customers and they'll move money around from their Wells Fargo account to the Chase account, back to the Wells Fargo account. You don't want to be moving money around. You don't want to be changing bank accounts. you want to have that conversation with your loan officer, and this is the fund where the earnest money is going to come from. This is where the down payment's going to come from. That way, appropriate expectations can be set. This is a huge one. Do not co-sign on any other type of debt ever. I have made this mistake personally. Co-signing on a loan is one of the worst financial mistakes that you can make. And the reason for that is because, number one, it means one of two things. It means either the person that you're trying to help doesn't have sufficient income, so they can't get qualified on their own because they don't have sufficient income. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that they have a repeated pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time. So when someone comes to you and asks you to co-sign, they either can't repay the loan or they have a history of not making their payments on time. A lot of times it's going to be a friend or a family member, but from your perspective, that debt is going to show up on your credit report. And most of the time it's going to be factored into your debt to income ratio. So you don't ever want to co-sign on a loan for anyone else. You also don't want to make any large purchases. Underwriters are going to be going through your bank statements. And if they see any abnormal withdrawals, it can get called out. I had a closing earlier today, and this individual had several buy now, pay later cash withdrawals out of his bank account. And we found out that he had financed about 50 different individual buy now, pay later loans. And if you're not familiar with that, that's where you can actually finance an individual item. So it's different than an in-store credit card. It's different than like a Costco, Amex, or Visa. I'm talking about individual items. And you may have seen this on some of your banking apps where you can actually break up the payment for individual purchases. So now you have the ability to finance a sweatshirt or finance a purse or a piece of jewelry or items that are $100. You can break those up into payments. It's very predatory. I'm very against that. So you do not want to do that. But these are the things that you want to be aware of. You don't want to have your credit pulled after you apply pre-approved. The credit bureaus will alert your lender if you've taken out any new debt or if you've had any new credit inquiries. So again, just something that you want to be aware of. And then finally, you don't want to have any cash deposits into your bank account. Cash deposits cannot be used. So, you don't want to have any last minute cash deposits, anything going into your bank account that's not sourced.
One thing I'll add to that too is I know we had somebody on our webinar last month that was talking about this. Especially for first-time home buyers, you're getting close to the closing date. You're getting super excited. You're starting to think about what furniture you're going to be buying and putting in your living room or the new master bedroom set. And man, you just got to be super careful here because you could do exactly what Ben's talking about with these large purchases. You could, 2 weeks out before closing, buy, $10,000 or $20,000 worth of stuff on a credit card. And all of a sudden now you no longer qualify for the loan and could totally, mess up the entire deal just because of something that seemed pretty harmless, initially, but just very, very important. Okay. So Ben, just one last thing before we move on, talk about credit score, specifically credit utilization. This is a little just awesome tip, I think, for everybody tonight, regardless of how well of a credit score you have. Maybe you guys are, at 800. It's still important to understand this because 99% of people don't really get this part of the credit score and how it's actually built and this credit utilization score specifically. So just give a quick rundown.
The reason I love sharing this, and thank you for building this into the presentation, Adam, is because a lot of us didn't have any financial literacy growing up. I know that I didn't. I never had anyone that taught me how money works, how finances work. I never had any high school classes. No one ever taught me how credit works. So I have made a lot of these mistakes myself, but most people think that when it comes to credit and building good credit, you just need to make your payments on time. Payment history is very important when it comes to credit score. But one of the most important categories is how your revolving credit is managed. There's all these different types of debts. And you may not know this, but there's installment debt, which is an auto loan. There's mortgage debt, which is a secured debt, or there's collateral, means the debt is secured to an asset. There is revolving debt. So revolving debt would be credit cards and in-store charge cards. Now, you want to keep that credit utilization rate always under 30%. And so what that means is that if your credit card has a limit of $10,000, you want to make sure that the balance on that credit card never exceeds $3,000 in that example, or 30%. Once it goes over, your credit score will start to rapidly decline. So the credit bureaus, they look at the local credit utilization rate, which is the individual account or the individual card, but then they also look at the global credit utilization rate as well. And that's all of your credit cards combined. And so that is one reason that me personally, whenever my credit card provider offers me an increase in my limit, I always accept it. And in some cases, I'll even request an increase myself, not so I can go buy a boat or be irresponsible, but so my credit utilization rate is also always as low as possible. That's also the same reason that I will pay my credit card, make multiple payments per month, just to keep that balance to limit ratio as healthy as possible. And these are the things that your average American consumer doesn't know. And so I've worked with folks before that they pay their credit card off in full every month and they're not getting charged any interest, but their limit might only be $6,000 and they're using that full $6,000 every single month and they're paying it off in full. But when the credit card company reports to the bureaus, it's still reporting the utilization is greater than 30%. And so even though they're making the payment in full, they're paying the balance in full, they're not paying any interest, they have a terrible credit score because they're exceeding that credit utilization of 30%. So very, very important.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great tips. All right, so that was the first step. Now we're on to step number 2, which is finding the right home for you. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, obviously being more on the real estate side as a realtor. But a couple just exercises that I like to use, especially for any of you guys that maybe are on tonight that are from out of state. I know I see a couple people on. I know one from Texas, and I think, Juan, I think you're from down south somewhere too. Anyways, what I'd love to do with those people that are from out of state, but even locals here, is 2 different exercises that I'm gonna share with you guys. The first one is, even if you aren't ready to buy a home today, maybe it isn't for another 6 months, having this as maybe an exercise you can do around the dinner table one night with your partner, your kids, whoever you're going to be living in this next home with. And that's talking through some of your priorities. Take an inventory of what's the most important to you, as well as anybody else that's going to be living in the house, and make a list of what are your must-haves, what are your non-negotiables in another sense, what are your nice to haves, as well as just any deal breakers. So, a nice to have, a must have, just to explain this a little bit more for you guys. A must have would be, let's just say you have a family and you have 2 kids. A must have would be having a minimum of 3 bedrooms. So each of your kids can have their own bedroom. A nice to have, a really good example of this, and I brought up a couple of out of state people that are on tonight just because of this one. It happens so often, is you come out to Colorado and you think, you're only going to need a 2-car garage. Your partner and you each have a car, so 2-car garage is totally fine. Well, come out to Colorado, you're going to have a lot of hobbies, and you're going to be continuing to pick up new hobbies every year you live out here, whether it be skiing, camping, biking, whatever it is. All that has stuff involved, just stuff that's going to need to go somewhere. And oftentimes that goes in your garage. So all of a sudden that 2-car garage has 2 bikes, camping gear, your skis, and now you can't even fit 2 cars in there anymore. So a nice to have might be an extended 2-car garage or even a 3-car garage. So it's not a, must have, it's not a non-negotiable, but it's a nice to have. And then any deal breakers, this could be, kind of along the same lines as the must have, but it could be things like if you do have kids that are going to be going into school, maybe as a specific school district you want to be in to make sure that they can continue to have the same friends they already do. Or, another deal breaker could just be a certain distance from your job that you're still commuting for every day. So just doing this kind of exercise can really help not only provide more clarity for you guys, but also when you share this with your realtor, somebody like myself, this is also just great data for a realtor to have to really just start to be fine tuning what might work out best for you guys, starting to show you options that fit what your priorities are. Another thing I like to do though is the second one, which is basically 2 out of these 3 aspects of the house are going to be most likely achievable. But, unless you have just no issue with money whatsoever, if the price isn't, going to be a factor at all, you might be able to get all 3 of these, but it's crazy how often 2 out of the 3 are at a very high level of success, but maybe not getting all three. So those three things are just price, location, and condition of the home. So what this means is, think through this. Which of these two are the most important to you guys? Let's just use one as an example here. So let's just say that there's an area in Denver called Sloan Lake. It's just west of downtown Denver. I used to live there. It's an awesome part of Denver, really good for walkability. You're close to a lot of the action in downtown Denver, close to the Broncos Stadium. At least right now you are. They're moving the stadium in 2030. But so anyways, there's the Sloan Lake area. So let's just say that that's an area that you really want to be in. Well, price is going to be a bit higher in that area. So that may or may not, be a factor here. The location we already talked about, that's Sloan Lake. So let's just say that of these two, you have a price point of $500,000. Well, if you want to be in Sloan Lake, then this third one, condition, you're going to have to make a little bit of a sacrifice. It's going to have to be, maybe a home that's going to need some TLC, some improvements over the next few years. And maybe some of those improvements can be done yourself to help save money and build up equity through sweat equity. Another example, though, would be, let's just say that you really want to be in Sloan Lake. So that's number two location. And you really want a brand new, or at least a home that's turnkey, meaning that you don't have to do really much of anything to move in. It's going to be clean, bright, everything's new appliances, fresh paint, all that kind of stuff. Well, if those two are the most important to you, then price is going to have to be significantly higher than that $500,000. So just another exercise for you guys to start maybe, toying around with and thinking through on which two of these three are the most important. Obviously, all three are, somewhat important for everybody, but which two are the most important? And then that's going to help us start to determine what are some of maybe the best areas or suggestions for how to move forward to make sure you guys get what you want.
I was going to share, I think I'm part of the statistic you were saying when it comes to the garage. I have a teenage daughter, and she turned my 2-car garage into the cat suite. And so we have 2 cats, and that's where the cats live now. A lot of people turn it into storage, or they put their ski gear or their motorcycle in there. And I'm not allowed to park in the garage because the cats, that's their house.
Okay. Well, I think you need to work on, I think you have priority over the cats. Maybe they can find a different place to live, especially as we get into the winter months here. But before moving on, you guys, just again, I talked about this earlier, but I'm going to be sharing with you a ton of stuff at the end of tonight's masterclass, lots of links and just additional resources. If you are out of state and you're just not that familiar with locations, as far as I mentioned, Sloan Lake, maybe other areas like that, you're just not that familiar yet with Denver, definitely check out my website, adamsoulsdenver.com. I've got this interactive map there. Really dive in deep on each of these neighborhoods. Also that YouTube channel. I've got neighborhood spotlights for over 50 neighborhoods throughout Denver. So just lots of resources that we'll be sharing with you guys at the end of tonight. All right, Ben, let's jump right into the third, which is just crafting that winning offer. I know I've got a few things to share on this, but before I do, is there anything you want to maybe kick us off with?
Why don't you go ahead and start, and then I'll jump in. But I would say this really quick. When it comes to crafting a winning offer, I think there are so many of us that think that in order for me to win, or for one party to win, the other party has to lose. And that's kind of how I used to think as well when I was starting my real estate journey. I thought that me winning meant the seller or someone else losing. And as I've matured and gotten more experience, I've realized that that's just not accurate. And the best deals and the best way a lot of times to craft an offer is by making it a win-win, a win for the buyer and also a win for the seller. And there is a way to do that. And kind of having said that, Adam, why don't you go ahead and take it away there and share some of the experiences and, kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah, those are that's a really good way to tee me up. Thanks. That wasn't intentional, but I appreciate that. I guess before I do that, though, really quick, guys, just for anybody that's maybe a first-time home buyer that's never bought a home yet, when you submit an offer, there's basically 3 outcomes. So the first one is you write up an offer, you send it over to the seller, and they can accept the offer as written, meaning everything looks great. Sure, we're going to go under contract. The price is right, the dates and deadlines, who pays for different closing costs. If all that stuff is, just acceptable to the seller and they just accept it, That is one of these three options, one of these three scenarios, but pretty unlikely. So I'd say that one is pretty rare. Just to be honest with you guys, I don't know if I've ever had an offer accepted as written. There's always been at least some form of a counter offer, which is the seller coming back to us and adjusting something. It could be something as little as just maybe a date. They want to have the closing date on a Wednesday instead of a Friday, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the first. The most common one is going to be this third one, but so that's number one. The second one is declining the offer, and luckily, I've never had this happen where it was just flat out declined and they didn't even counter back. So if the offer is getting declined, that's probably one of two things. Either the offer was written very poorly, you're not creating that win-win scenario, or it could have been an example of a few years back when there was just so many offers coming in on homes the day they hit the market. It was such a competitive market for buyers that in that time there was, often scenarios where, they got 10 offers and they just kind of picked the best one and the other 9 just got declined. So that is, still a potential for happening, but the most common is this third one, which is a counter offer. And again, that's just when the seller is coming back and asking for some type of changes to be made. All right. So now let's talk through, though, a couple tips on how to create that win-win offer. And the biggest one, if you guys can take anything away from me tonight, maybe if you're, hopefully not, but maybe if there's any realtors else on tonight that are trying to, see what we're doing. This is a great example for something that any really good realtor has a good understanding of, which is just picking up the phone, calling the selling agent, the listing agent, and finding out what the motivation is for why the home is being sold. And it is crazy how often it is not price that's the highest motivating factor. There's a lot of things that sometimes are a bit negative. Maybe it's a divorce. Maybe they're really sad because their only child is graduating high school and they're going to be empty nesters soon. Maybe, one of the owners had a major job loss and they need to downsize. There's a lot of reasons for selling a home outside of just wanting to make top dollar and buy something else that's even better. So there's lots of motivation, and it's important to understand that as a buyer's agent, as somebody that's writing the offer, because you can take that information you get from the seller and craft it in a way to make that win-win possible. So, and there's lots of different ways to do this, but the example that I put here in the presentation is what's called a PCOA, also known as a post-closing occupancy agreement. So this would just be an example of one of these ways to create a win-win. And just a quick example of what that means. Let's just say that, right now it's, obviously going into November, but let's just say it was maybe like June right now. So maybe that is a family that has a kid that's just graduating high school, getting ready for college, and their home is currently on the market in June. And, they really want to stay in their home at least through the end of July so they can enjoy their final summer with their kid before he goes off to college. Maybe there's some graduation parties that they want to, host at their house before selling it. So by getting that information out of the seller, what you could potentially do is still have the closing date maybe be the end of June. So pretty quick, but offering a PCOA, a post-closing occupancy agreement, to allow them after the closing date to still stay in their home. And you can do this for up to 60 days. You could charge them a daily rental amount. You can still have a security deposit. They basically then become as if like a tenant relationship where they're now your tenant. If it's under 60 days, you're able to do this with a little bit less restrictions. But this would just be one way of getting creative and making it more desirable for the seller to choose your offer over others and make that win-win scenario. Because oftentimes what happens is people that are selling, they probably are also trying to buy something else. And until they sell, they need that money to buy their next home. So oftentimes this can be a very strong positive for the seller to see this and be willing to accept it, sometimes maybe for even a lower purchase price than another offer that came in. But since we're getting creative, we're making that win-win scenario, they still might take yours at even a lower price than somebody else's offer. So that's just one example.
And that's one thing that has always stood out about you, Adam, that I have so much respect for, is that you are not afraid to call the listing agent and ask some of those questions before you write an offer. You'll ask, are your sellers looking to close on a specific date? What is their motivation? Do they have any particular preferences for the earnest money? And by asking some of those open-ended questions, a lot of times the listing agent is going to give you information that's going to really help you in putting that offer together. And when you're able to write the offer, it doesn't mean that you're not representing your buyers. They're going to have their goals and what they're looking to accomplish. But if you can put those things in the contract, closing date, specific earnest money amount, other things that are important to the seller, they are a lot of times going to be willing to work with you on some of your buyers' goals and what their needs are.
Definitely. So anyways, you guys, that's just one example, but there's a lot of others similar to that I can, share with you guys on a different time. But really, really important just to have that win-win mindset from day one. Before you even go under contract, just crafting that winning offer. It is just one of the tips that I can share with you guys tonight that I think is more important than almost everything else that we cover. So really, really good stuff there. All right. So after we've done that offer, we've crafted the winning offer and hopefully it's been accepted. Now we're officially under contract. Now I wanted to share with you guys two really important aspects of being under contract. We call it the contract to close phase. And I wanted to kind of identify these two, again, not to be kind of catering only to our out-of-state buyers that are on the call tonight, but these are things that are a little bit different sometimes in Colorado than other states. And that's why I wanted to at least specifically talk about them in our masterclass tonight. So before I do that, I think, Ben, I'll go a little bit more in depth on the home inspection piece. Do you want to maybe just talk for a second about the appraisal first, just to kind of start us off?
Yeah, well, in most cases, your lender is going to require an appraisal. If you're using some type of specialty program, down payment assistance, a first-time homebuyer program, an appraisal is always going to be required. Now, if you're putting 20% down or more, you may get an appraisal waiver where there's enough recent data in the market, in the neighborhood, that an appraisal is not required. And typically, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac will communicate that to your lender. But if an appraisal is required, that's going to be something that's ordered through your lender. They're going to get a third-party appraiser or professional out there to just assess that the property is worth what you as the buyer and the seller have agreed to as outlined in the sales contract. So the appraiser doesn't work for the bank. They don't work for the buyer or the listing agent or the seller. They're a true third party, and they are giving their professional opinion on value. And so that's very important. The reason that the banks require it a lot of times is to protect the bank's interest because they're going to be lending that money out. But it's also protecting your interest as well as the buyer, where you're getting that third party to really certify that the home is worth as much as you have agreed upon. So you're getting a local market expert to verify the value as outlined in the sales contract, and that'll give you confidence. In some cases, the appraiser is going to have an opinion of value that's higher than what the sales contract is, and I've seen that a lot lately. The sales price might be $500,000, but the appraiser appraises it for $520,000. If that happens, the sales price doesn't change, and you get that instant equity as a buyer. Now, if the appraisal comes in low, which I still have not seen a lot of lately, I have not been seeing appraisals come in low. But if it does come in low, you as the buyer here in the state of Colorado, you have the ability to go back and disclose that to the seller, renegotiate the contract, or cancel if there can't be a revised agreement. So, and that's something that's also really great about our Colorado real estate contract is you have all these different dates and deadlines that are outlined in the contract that protect you and protect your earnest money, insurance, title, HOA, mortgage, and inspection and appraisal are a big part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On that note, I think inspection is probably the biggest one that tends to have deals fall out of contract. So, once you get through inspection, the chances of making it all the way to the closing table are much, much higher. So the inspection tends to be one that's oftentimes a sticking point. So the couple points that I want to share with you guys specifically on inspection is how important they are. They do have a cost involved, and this is something that you as the home buyer will typically be the one paying for. It could be anywhere from about $400 to as much as maybe $700, depending on the size of the home, location, that kind of stuff. But a home inspection is basically just when we have a very qualified person come out that's a licensed home inspector. I've got a couple great guys that I use on every deal that I am involved in, and they'll spend anywhere between 4 to 5 hours just digging into every part of the home. The crawl space, the roof, the everything. From top to bottom. And what this does is it gives us a very good understanding of, what may or may not be inspection objections. So an inspection objection is after that inspection happens, if we've identified a few things that maybe we want to try and push back on and either get the price of the home dropped slightly or have a concession at closing, meaning that the seller is willing to give a dollar amount to basically justify this inspection objection that we have. It's just super duper important to have an inspection done. And that's also the case, even if it's a brand new home. So even new construction homes, it's still important to do this because you'd be amazed at how often a home inspection is done on a brand new build and they still come up with all kinds of stuff that needs to get fixed. There's two things in Colorado that might not be as common, depending on where you guys are watching this tonight from. The first one being radon. So radon is this odorless gas that sometimes can get trapped underneath the home if you have a crawl space or any sort of a contained area below your home. And this is something that comes up all the time these days where if the radon level comes in high, we're able to, during this inspection objection, ask for a dollar amount. Typically, it's about $1,500, maybe $2,000 to help pay for a radon mitigation system, which is basically this fan that sucks the air out of this contained area below your home. And then it goes to the outside of the home and then goes up to the roof and blows it all in an area outside where it's not affecting anybody walking by or your kids outside playing. So the radon test is always really important in Colorado. And this is something that you add on to the regular home inspection. It's about $90, so very low cost compared with the value you get from, at least if nothing else, knowing that you don't have radon. And then the other one is what's called a sewer scope. And these are things that a lot of, when I'm selling homes, a lot of the buyers that I'm under contract with, it's crazy how often they don't even do this. But a sewer scope is basically another guy that will come out, different from the inspector himself, and they have this camera on it. They call it a snake, where basically they'll find an area in your home called a clean out, where they'll put this camera down and they'll inspect the entire sewer line from your house to where it connects to in most cases, if you're in a more urban area, connects to the main sewer line for your neighborhood. And in Colorado, we have a lot of big trees, a lot of trees that have a lot of roots. And if you're buying a home that maybe is 20, 30 years old, this small little, tree that got planted in the front yard is now all of a sudden this 75-foot tall evergreen tree with these massive roots. And those roots, especially if it's an older home, can be impeding on the clay pipe, the clay sewer pipe that's going maybe underneath your grass in your front yard out to that main sewer line. And this is one that the reason I'm talking so much about this is because it is very, very expensive to get fixed if the sewer line is in jeopardy. So for another, maybe $100, $125 to have that sewer scope, that sewer inspection done. I've just had many cases personally with homes that I've helped buy that have been, big, big issues where we've avoided those by having a sewer scope done. So anyways, lots of different things that go into the inspection. We can talk through more of that later on, but very, very important to have both the inspection done. And if you are getting a loan, you're going to have that appraisal done as well.
Yeah, and you just want to know what you're buying. You're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $500,000 or more on this purchase, and so you want to really know the ins and outs. I know that you touched on this a minute ago, Adam, but just keep in mind that if there are issues during the inspection, you can reopen that negotiation time period where you can ask for a seller credit to pay for certain items, or you can ask for something to be replaced. I had a customer last month, and just what you were mentioning, the sewer was on its last leg. It was already partially collapsed. Now, there wasn't any evidence of that from the home. When you flush the toilets and the shower, there were no concerns that had manifested yet. But when they did the sewer scope, they could tell that it was already partially collapsed. So this buyer was able to get the seller to completely replace that. And in this case, it was over a $20,000 value. Had they not done that, they wouldn't have been aware of it, and then they would have had to deal with the problem 6 months or a year down the road.
Yeah. All right, guys, so let's just jump now into our final step 5, which is the closing. Very exciting, and that final walkthrough. So I'll share a quick thing about the final walkthrough, and then I'll let Ben talk about closing day. For the final walkthrough, what this is usually it's within about 24 to 48 hours of the closing day. So it could even be the morning of the closing day. And what this is it's just us going to the home and doing one final walkthrough. So for any of you guys that are out of state, this is something that's very easy for us to do even remotely, where I'll go, look at the home this one final time myself, can use my, phone and do a FaceTime with you guys, or just kind of give you my feedback on if anything looks out of the norm. But basically, it's super duper important to be doing this because there's oftentimes things that you aren't expecting can come up. One example of this that I unfortunately had seen firsthand is in the springtime, when everybody's getting ready to get their sprinklers, kicked on for the year, their irrigation lines outside of their homes. I had a customer, really is more of a friend of mine, who had, a couple weeks earlier, again, hired somebody to come out and get all of the sprinklers ready for the season, turned on. And he had accidentally not remembered to tighten this tiny, tiny little bolt inside his house where the water line was for the sprinklers. Ended up leaving, actually was on Easter. He went to Easter with his family, came back that afternoon, and there was about 6 inches or more of water, standing water in his basement because of this one little, innocent mistake. So you can imagine if, somebody like that was doing that maybe a week before closing. If you didn't do the final walkthrough to see this for yourself, you could have just gone straight to the closing, signed the dotted line, bought the home, and then really excited going to the home afterwards. And now it's your problem. So that final walkthrough is important for, one-off scenarios like that, as well as just making sure that anything in the home that has been agreed upon in the contract to now be your property once the home is purchased. Fixtures, as an example, maybe a washer and dryer that was included, maybe a special chandelier above the living room, things like that. This final walkthrough is also important because there's been so many times where maybe the seller accidentally, or maybe it was intentionally, maybe they accidentally took something with them that they weren't supposed to. And by doing the final walkthrough and catching things like this, we can have it hopefully addressed and fixed and remedied, and still do the closing, but have it, fixed and adjusted or whatever it may be. But just being able to be aware of how important the final walkthrough is to catch little things like that.
Yeah, and then on closing day, that's the day that you are going to be signing all of your documents, normally at a title company, but always in front of a notary. You're also going to bring your closing funds into title. They need to be in the form of a certified funds cashier's check or a money wire. And then you're also going to be signing your financial documents. There's going to be several different documents that you're going to be signing with different parties. You're going to be signing documents with you and the lender if you're getting a loan. So an example of some of those documents would be the promissory note, the loan application, the deed of trust that is going to secure the debt or the mortgage to the asset, which is the collateral or the property. You're going to be signing documents between you as the buyer and the seller. One of those documents is the warranty deed that transfers the ownership from the seller to the buyer. You're also going to be signing documents between you as the buyer and the title company. The title company is going to prepare the final settlement statement. And there's a couple other documents that they will assist with as well. Usually the closing takes anywhere from a half hour to an hour. Again, you're going to be signing that in front of a notary. Once everything is signed, notarized, verified, and those closing funds are in receipt, at that point, the documents will officially record. Some of the documents, like the deed of trust, are going to be publicly recorded, where they will go, if you're purchasing in Jefferson County, for example, you can go on to jeffersoncounty.org or .gov and look up some of these documents, the deed of trust, for example. So once they record, or once they're sent down for recording, then at that point, that is when the transaction is officially closed and you are the new owner. You don't have to wait for it to record, because that does take a couple of days. Really, as soon as everything has been fully executed and those closing funds are in receipt. And then that's when you get your keys and you can pop the champagne and start to celebrate.
Yep, that's a good day. All right, guys, so we're almost done. Thank you so much, by the way, for sticking around. I know this is a lot of info, but just got one last thing to share with you, and then we'll do a live Q&A. So just kind of wrap things up here and kind of bring it full circle. These are 3 of the biggest mistakes that home buyers are making. In 2025, we've seen this firsthand, and unfortunately, I bet we'll continue to see this going into next year. So just a little kind of reminder on a few things to definitely don't do at all costs. So the first one is just overlooking any hidden costs. So remember, owning a home, it's not just about that mortgage payment, or maybe you're a cash buyer and you're not even doing a mortgage. There's still, though, other expenses that you have to make sure you're aware of, especially if you are, under a budget and you're wanting to make sure that you're not leveraging yourself too much where you're able to make these monthly payments. So outside of just the cost of buying the home, you have other things. You have property taxes, insurance, maintenance on the home. And if you are in a homeowners association or a metro tax district, also, if you're in either of those, you're going to have additional costs associated with that. The one that I'll share before maybe getting Ben's take on this one is regarding property taxes. So, every state is different when it comes to property taxes. In Colorado, the way that I like to always share with friends and family and maybe people like yourselves that are considering working with us is it's usually on average about 0.5% for the annual property tax amount. So if you're buying a $500,000 home, and this isn't, across every home, it varies. Every home is different, but on average, you're looking at about 0.6, so a little bit over 0.5%. So I use 0.5%. So a $500,000 home, you're looking at about $2,500 a year as your annual property tax amount. However, there's certain areas that are significantly higher than that. And a lot of times they tend to be in new construction communities. So I live right now in Littleton, which is kind of southwest side of town. There's an area a little bit further southwest from me. And this would be a great example of this where it is significantly higher. It's at almost 1.5% of an annual tax rate. So that same $500,000 home, maybe in Denver, down in this area that I'm referring to, it's called Sterling Ranch. It might be 1.5%. So a $500,000 home now you're looking at $7,500 a year. So significant differences, and these hidden costs can, really add up if you're not keeping a close eye on them. So that's just one example.
Yeah, and one of the suggestions that I have is on top of that, being aware what the property taxes are, the HOA. It's also helpful to go back and look at a history of the property taxes as well, just so you can kind of get a feel for how much they increase from year to year. I've always suggested that. I think as a buyer, especially as a first-time home buyer, you want to make sure that you have a little bit of a reserve cushion in some of your liquid accounts, checking or savings. Sometimes I'll talk to first-time home buyers and they want to put like every penny that they have towards the down payment. And I think that's a mistake, because there are going to be the what ifs or the unknowns, or life is going to happen. And if you don't have anything available to kind of fall back on, you're going to lose your peace of mind. It's going to become very stressful. So I always recommend having a little bit of a reserve cushion, 3 months. If you can do 6 months, whatever that mortgage payment is, that's a great thing. So if your mortgage payment's $2,000, try at least have an emergency fund of $6,000 to $12,000. I found that that's really, really impactful as far as just that home buyer confidence and reducing stress.
Yeah, great tip. I already got on my soapbox on this one, so I won't go too much more in depth on this one, you guys, but neglecting home inspections is such a big one. I'm really passionate about this. The one thing I will add to this, for anybody that's maybe considering buying a new build home, so a new construction home that's you're going to be the first person ever to live in it. A lot of this scenario is when people are saying, well, I don't need a home inspection. It's a brand new house. If you're still not willing, even after everything I've been telling you guys tonight, if you're still not willing to pay for that home inspection up front, most new build communities will have a 1-year home warranty on the home. So if you aren't going to do it up front, the last resort, if nothing else, try and still put in your calendar that at about month 10 after you've owned the home, have a home inspection done at that point, because you can then have some collateral, some proof to take to the builder and have all these other miscellaneous things hopefully improved and fixed before that 1-year warranty is up. So if you aren't willing to pay for it up front, at least hopefully, take my word on this, you guys can hopefully at least do that as an alternative.
Yeah, and really quick on the new construction comment there. If you are looking at new construction, you definitely want to have an agent represent you. And the reason for that is because in the new construction world, the builder, they control the construction of the property. Most of the time, they control the lending, they control the title company, and then they're going to have a sales representative that's going to be on site who's very friendly. And you think that person's going to be assisting you and representing you. They might assist you, but they're not going to be representing you. They are still a representative of the builder, just like all of those other components. And so you want to have someone that truly represents you. It doesn't cost anything more to use an agent. And I've seen so many times where buyers go into a new construction community thinking that, you know, the salesperson is very friendly, they're going to help me. Oh, you don't need the inspection. And then all these other things pop up. And again, you want to have someone that is dedicated just to you and is willing to have those tough conversations when they come up.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of Ben there, maybe you guys aren't aware of this yet, but it's not all the time, but I would say it's well over 95% of the time, it's the seller that's paying for the commission of somebody like myself as a buyer's agent. So you're not paying extra for somebody like myself to represent you as a buyer's agent. The seller is typically paying for that. So especially with the new construction community, by not having a buyer's agent representing you, you're not getting a better deal on the house. You're going to be paying the exact same amount as you would having somebody like myself, anybody, a realtor representing you as the buyer. So just to make that point even more clear of how important it is, and it's not costing you anything. It's really a win-win. Okay, and then let's do the third and final one. I know Ben is very passionate about this. I actually am too. So just emotional decision-making. You know, buying this home for a lot of people is the biggest, you know, decision, biggest purchase they're ever going to make in their entire lives. So don't let emotions overrule practical considerations in making sure that you're buying the right house. You know, that's why some of those tips that I shared earlier to maybe do around the dinner table with whoever you're going to be living in the home with, have some of these non-negotiables, have some of these really important things identified up front. So then hopefully you're never even being put into a position to consider homes that really don't make sense, but also having a more clear mind where you are able to walk away from potentially a deal if it just doesn't meet what the criteria is that we've put together. So just how important it is to not have emotion cloud your judgment and make a decision that could really bite you in the butt down the road.
Yeah, and you want to be emotional. You want to get excited and feel that energy and the rush when you're buying your next home, or maybe it's your first home. And it's such an exciting time in your life, and you will always remember that first home. And maybe you have a family, and you're going out in the backyard, and you're thinking, you know, my kids are going to be playing back here someday. And it's important to have those dreams and those goals and have that family vision. But you also want to stay grounded too. You don't want those emotions to control the decision process. And so that's where I'm very big on. And I think sometimes one of the biggest mistakes people make is they let the emotions control the decision process. And that's why you want to have that financial plan, that budget outlined before you start looking at homes, because those emotions are going to pull really hard. And it's very easily to get out of alignment with what you're looking to do financially when your emotions start really talking to you in a very loud way. And you also don't want to be this person either. And I've seen folks that have made this mistake where they have no intention of buying. They haven't even thought of buying. They walk into an open house on a Sunday afternoon, and then all of a sudden they're writing an offer an hour later. You know, you do not want to be that person, because that is how you get into trouble.
Yep. Very, very important. Okay, so next steps before we do the live Q&A here in a second, how to move forward, not necessarily with buying a home, but just, you know, next steps. First and foremost, you know, if you have questions that maybe are more one-on-one that you'd rather ask in a private setting with Ben or myself or both of us, you know, feel free to reach out. I'm going to be sharing all of Ben's contact info in an email immediately after tonight's call. And as well as myself, you know, I'm always happy to jump on a 30-minute real estate strategy session, and Ben offers these as well. I'm going to be sharing with you guys a link if you want to book one of these. It's just a chance for us to learn a little bit more about each other. I can hopefully find a little bit more out about what your specific situation is and what your goals are, and help give you some additional resources and just help you take that first step to building a game plan to succeed, hopefully here in the next year. So just more than anything else, having the educational resources at your fingertips and being intentional about absorbing as much of this type of content as you can, similar to this webinar tonight that you're on. So great job for already doing some of this, but it's just so important to be doing as much as you can on the front end before ever even, you know, considering buying a home. So good job for all you guys that are staying around and really consuming all of this content tonight.
And remember, you're in control. Ask questions. No one is going to force anything upon you. If you don't understand something, bring that to your real estate agent's attention. If you don't understand some of the financing paperwork, because there's going to be a lot of it, it's okay. There is a lot of paperwork on the real estate, title, and the lending side. And I always tell the customers that I work with that if something's important to you, it's important to me, but I need you to bring that to my attention because I can't guess what's important to you. And if you don't ask the question, then I can't answer it for you. So if you have a concern, if you have a question, if you'd like to get more information about a specific topic, please share that with me.
Very, very well said. So again, if you guys want to get the info immediately, all these free resources, you guys can scan this, but it'll be coming to you here very shortly. And with that, let's just go ahead and open it up to our live Q&A. I was so busy talking throughout this last hour and 15 minutes. I know, Ben, you had responded already to one question. I think it was from Juan, I think. Maybe
we had a question in regards to the Fed rate cut today, and that's going to be a big question that I'm just going to get from a lot of the customers I'm talking with because it's in the news. It happened today. So let me just comment on that really quick. So yes, the Fed did cut the Fed funds rate a 1/4 point today. And however, it's not going to have a huge impact on rates right now, or at least it didn't today because it was already priced into the market. Now, what that means is that the market had already anticipated that that was going to happen because the Fed had come out from some of their prior meetings and given indication that that was likely to happen this meeting and then also the next meeting. So when the Fed makes those announcements, because our capitalist markets are efficient, it's immediately priced in. So that's why rates are currently at a 52-week low from some of the slides that we talked about earlier. Now, what's going to be interesting is to see how the market digests everything. One thing that was interesting about today's announcement is that there was 2 dissenters. There was one Fed governor that wanted a 1/2 point cut, and then there was a second Fed governor that wanted to leave rates the same. So that's a little bit of an outlier. That's actually very uncommon. Most of the time, these decisions are unanimous. And so the fact that there's some dissent and that they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, that's very interesting. One other thing is that in the Fed's announcement, because of the government shutdown, they didn't have any recent data to really go off of. Because of the shutdown for the last 29 days. And so really they were basing that off of information back from September. So, we'll see how markets react to that. Of course, we have the government shutdown that's ongoing right now. And so that's another big factor. So there's been a lot more just, I would say, economic variables, political variables over the past 12 months. The good news, though, is that rates are at a 52-week low. And again, there are ways to get creative with the financing, to buy the interest rate down, to do a 2-1 buy down if you're looking for a specific payment. So it is possible.
I know we didn't really talk too much about the 2-1 buy down, these different, creative financing strategies. I think just to save time tonight, guys, if you have questions about that specifically, we can talk in much more depth and detail on any of that kind of stuff if you guys wanted to book a one-on-one with us. So, and that's something that Ben could even just do just between you and him. So if you have questions on that specifically, feel free to reach out. I think Juan actually just had a follow-up or another question. So Juan, thanks for the questions tonight. He's asking, is an apartment different than a house for HOA expenses? I'm not 100% what you mean by this one, but the one thing maybe I'll say, maybe this helps answer it, is oftentimes an apartment or a condo will have higher HOA expenses than a single family home. Anytime you're in a master plan community, so if you are, I'm not sure Juan, yeah, you said you're from, I think, Arizona or somewhere. So out here in Colorado, we have several very large master plan communities, one of them being Highlands Ranch. I actually live in one called Grant Ranch. In a master plan community, those will almost always have an HOA. If it's a large master plan community, typically they won't be as expensive, maybe $100 a month, 150, something like that. Apartments, on the other hand, though, especially if it's a smaller sized apartment, not the home itself, but just the amount of units, how big of a development it is. If it's on the smaller side, sometimes those can be significantly higher, where maybe it's $300 or $400 a month, especially if it has a lot of amenities. Single family homes often don't have a clubhouse or a pool and a fitness center, but most apartments have that kind of stuff, and those are paid for through the HOA. So just be aware that if you are looking specifically for condos or apartments, the HOAs can be higher, and that's why it's always important to share that info with somebody like Ben to really get a full understanding of what the full math is going to be on your monthly payment, including all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's also just important to make sure that everyone understands that HOA payments can change over the years, and that can be frustrating, especially because they have a tendency to go up, not down. So if you are looking at a townhome or a condo with a significant HOA, again, it doesn't mean that it's wrong or a bad thing to consider those properties. You just want to have an awareness of how they work.
Mm-hmm. And the other one, I don't know if you guys picked up earlier, I said something where I mentioned a metro tax district. So this would also be something that you're needing to be aware of. It's not an HOA. HOA is homeowner association. Metro tax district is a short-term additional amount you're going to be paying. It's usually for civil engineering improvements. So if you are maybe buying in a new build community that's brand new and they've been building roads and sidewalks and maybe some parks, everything is getting built from the ground up right then and there. Oftentimes they will subsidize the cost of that by having a metro tax district where you might have a additional tax for, oftentimes it's like 20 years. So metro tax districts are another example, though, of something to be aware of very early on to make sure that you're comfortable with whatever that might be. And guys, I don't think we have any other questions. I think that's the only one that I'm seeing in here. So we'll stick around here for a minute. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, we can always, again, answer anything on a one-on-one. That link will be in an email coming out here in the next 15 minutes or so after tonight.
Well, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to be on here. Adam, thank you for the invitation. I hope that all of our viewers found value on this call tonight. And we're here to support you. We believe in you. You can do this. It is possible. And if you have questions, if you want to get more information, Adam and I would both love to be a resource to talk through your questions and help you make an informed financial decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ben, thank you so much. As always, you're a wealth of information, and love your optimism and just your excitement, and just you're a great guy to do these with. And you guys, if you enjoy just kind of listening to the two of us going back and forth tonight, we also have our podcast. It's called the Pursuit of Progress Podcast. We have new episodes every Friday. You can find us on Spotify, Apple. We have full video versions every week as well on YouTube. So you can check us out there if you want a little bit more of us on not just real estate related content, but also just more on financial literacy and just how to really improve your personal and professional lives and just work hard on becoming 1% better every single day. So look forward to hopefully seeing you guys on there as well. And thanks again for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys hopefully soon.
Love you guys. Have a great night.